Here they come. All right. All right. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Kathleen March, and I am the children's manager at Anderson's Bookshop in Downers Grove. So yes, I am super excited to be here tonight with all of you and with our guest of honor, John Patrick Green, because I have been an investigator fan since they first hit our shelves. So thank you so much for giving me books that I love to give to new readers. And all I got to do is hand it to people and be like, hey, they're investigators, get it? Investigators. So yeah, it doesn't take much to entertain me at all. So thank you guys for joining us. Tonight we have, as I said, John Patrick Green with us. And we're going to be talking everything investigators, but we have a twofer tonight because leading the conversation, we have Adam Kullberg from Pop Culture Classroom. So Adam is going to be our host with the most this evening. So without further ado, gentlemen, I will turn it over to you. Thank you both for being here this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having us. All right, great. Well, welcome everyone. Are we ready to chat? Yeah, I see some excited faces. Oh yeah. All right. Awesome. I see some excited dark black screens as well. I could just tell behind the surface of those you are just waiting for this to get started. So just a quick intro. My name is Adam Kullberg. I work for an organization called Pop Culture Classroom. We do a lot of educational work around comics, graphic novels, board games, everything under the pop culture sun. And I'm really excited to be here today with John Patrick Green. As you all know, the author and illustrator of Investigators and many other amazing books. And with that, are you ready to jump in, John? You feeling good?
I am. I'm ready.
All right. So first question is probably the most obvious for you. But you know, I know some of the folks on the call here may be learning about the books for the first time. Maybe they don't know fully what they're about. So I'd love if you could describe a little bit about what Investigators is all about.
Okay, so I'm gonna hold up the book. You know, it's always good to use visuals. So Investigators is a chapter book graphic novel. Random spread. So it's a comic book, chapter book, comic book, graphic novel about these two alligators named Mango and Brash, and they wear vests, which is why they're investigators. And they solve crimes and mysteries wearing these vests, which aren't just normal vests. They're VESTs, which stands for Very Exciting Spy Technology, because they're super spies who work for an organization called SUIT, which stands for Special Undercover Investigation Teams. So it's a very funny series full of puns and wordplay and gags and animal characters and human characters. And it's a lot of fun. And I guess that's basically the gist of it.
That's the elevator pitch, yeah. And
yes.
If you haven't had a chance to read it yet, obviously you've got the whole series. You've got book one, the regular Investigators. I don't know if I call them regular, but certainly the
original flavor.
You got Take the Plunge as well, which is going down into the sewers and exploring the world below and some of the villains and settings that make up that. And then of course you saw the newest book. So all really great books. And I know you have another one coming out later this year, and I'd love to hear a little more about that later. But could you talk a little bit about right here, right? So where did this idea came from? what was it born out of? What kind of inspired you to create this story?
So the first book came about because prior to Investigators, I had done a number of early reader graphic novels, which are, basically the similar thing. They're comic books, but they're about 80 pages long, and they're a little bit younger. They're like an in-between between a picture book and a chapter book. And so I had done one called Hippopotamuster, and I had done one called Kitten Construction Company, and I did two of the Kittens books. And they did well enough that my publisher, they came to me and they asked me if I had any ideas for new books, and they specifically wanted a chapter book. And so I had to basically, they said, hey, do you have any ideas for chapter books? And I'm like, yeah, sure, of course. I'm sure I have an idea. So I had to think of one, and they were like, great, you have until Monday. And this was maybe a Thursday or something. Because my editor, and they're the editor is the person who basically, they tell you if your book is a good idea, and they will say, yes, this is a good idea. We want you to make this book. And so she was the person who I had to convince that I had a good idea. And she was going to go on maternity leave. So that's why I had such a short amount of time to come up with an idea. So I had like 3 days to think of an idea. And basically, I knew that I wanted to do a book about animals because I like drawing animals. And I had done a book with the hippo, and a book with kittens. So I knew I wanted animals. And I like drawing animals wearing clothing because I think that's inherently funny when you see an animal like in a human world wearing clothing. And I like stories about characters with jobs, the like stories that revolve around a specific jobs, because I think they're very relatable. It kind of has a built-in, accessibility. Like if you do a story about a firefighter, like everyone knows what firefighters do, right? So that was my list: animals wearing clothing with jobs. And the publisher wanted a series. So I knew I was going to have to do a bunch of these. And so I just started with the joke. Like I did not come up with the pun, investigators being alligators in vests. But like something it reminded me of that old joke. And so you have alligators as the animal, in vests as the clothing. And then as a job, I figured, well, if they go undercover as investigators, then they can have any job. So I could dress them up in any sort of clothing. And then that led to the idea that the vests would be very exciting spy technology, and they would have a different one for every job that they get. And so that was over the weekend. They came up with that, as well as I came up with like 20 other like 1-sentence ideas, and I pitched them to the publisher on Monday. And then on like Wednesday, they called me, and I was like, okay, which one do you like? And they said, well, we like investigators the best. And then I said, well, what were rank all the other ideas. And so they mentioned the other ideas that they liked. And one of the other ideas was Dr. Copter. It's a guy that can turn into a helicopter. And, and they did that for a bunch of other ideas. And so I immediately said, well, that's going to be the supporting cast. I don't know how they're going to fit. But now, because I had such a short time to come up with it, I was like, I'll just use all the ideas. And that will determine just how much of them gets into the book, And that was basically it. That's how it came about.
Yeah, I like the gradual how wordplay sort of began the story that eventually formed like the basis of these books. That's really cool to hear. And a good lesson out there to any aspiring creators. When you get those zany ideas and things that you might want to pitch, keep them in the back of your mind, because they might be something that'll be interesting one day to somebody.
Or in a book. Write them in a book or a notebook.
Yeah.
Or a Word document that you keep on I have a Word document open on my computer all the time that I just type every silly little idea that comes to my head.
Always keep track of those ideas. You never know when the silly ones will end up becoming really great. So I think one of the really interesting things about these books is that you're serving, as both the writer and the illustrator. And I think that I wanted to hear a little bit about kind of like your creative process. Like, what's your favorite part when you kind of approach a book? Where do you start when you're creating kind of a new story and brainstorming and putting things down on the page?
So I start I start with that list of ideas. So usually while I'm working on one book, I will start just having random ideas for the next book. and I will just write them down into this Word document. And when it becomes time to actually turn that into a story, I will try to organize them into like a bullet pointed list that details what happens. And that'll include like, plot, like this happens, then this happens. And sometimes it'll include just like dialogue where sometimes I don't know how it fits into the story, but I want a character to say a specific thing or have a specific interaction with other characters. And other times I will think of like a joke that's either a visual joke or a dialogue joke that I don't know where it's going to fit, but I think it'll just be funny, and I'll put that in the list at some point. And then I will run those ideas past the editor, who again is the person that says, yes, this is good, go ahead and do it. And then once that gets like a thumbs up, and that's just the skeleton of the story, then what I do is I write the story, and I put write in quotes because I kind of write by doing these things called thumbnails. Now my thumbnails are pretty big. Let's skip to, see, these are what I call thumbnails. And these are basically the entire book sketched out. Some of these are pencil, so they might be hard to see. Sketched out as more or less like stick figures. They're a little bit better than stick figures. These are all from the third book. And by the third book, I was oh no, now they're out of order. By the third book, I was drawing a little more precise, I guess you could say. I had a better sense of the characters and what they would look like. But this is like how I write the whole book. I take like, 100 sheets of typing paper, and I just start sketching out what the entire story is going to be. And I'll write the dialogue and kind of make it up as I go along, referencing that list of plot points and jokes and whatnot. So that's how I write, because since it's going to be a comic and I'm going to be the one drawing it, I always sort of have I see the sort of story in my head. Like I see, how the characters are acting, like I'm watching it in my head in a way. So that's how the story unfolds for me. And I sometimes find it very hard to just write down what I see happening. It's like I just need to have it exist in space. Like there's a spatial sort of relation to how the story comes together for me. So that's my writing process. And then this whole stack gets scanned into the computer, and I will type it out because my handwriting isn't the easiest to read. And so I'll type it out for the editor to read. And then they will, since everything is just sort of rough, that's when changes can be made without me having to like do a lot of redrawing or anything like that. Because I didn't put a lot of time into the art. So it's easy to make changes. And then when they give the thumbs up, then I will do the actual art, which I still draw on paper with pens and pencils and stuff. And then things like coloring get done in computer. So that's basically my process, start to finish.
Is there any part of it that's like your favorite? Like you look forward to as you're getting the book?
My favorite part is kind of, I don't know, there's something rewarding about every step. So having the story done, when I'm done writing it and the editors read it and they said, this is good, go ahead and draw it. Like that feels great. But then now I have to do all the actual labor intensive part of drawing it. But that is sort of like incrementally rewarding, because every time I finish a page, it feels relieving. This is a sigh of relief, because it's one less page that I have to do to get the whole book done. So even though while I enjoy drawing, I get sort of the most satisfaction out of having done the drawing and being able to look at it and think that's done, and I'm happy and I'm happy that it's done. So it's I don't know, I like, yeah, I like that sense of accomplishment that I get from writing and drawing.
Yeah, that's great. I think, and then having like the physical book in your hand, I see some on your bookshelf. That must be
Oh
good.
yeah, that's always nice. And I do indeed have an R2D2, a Lego R2D2. Someone asks if I am a Star Wars fan. I am indeed a Star Wars fan. I'm also a Star Trek fan. And oddly enough, there's usually more Star Trek references in the books than Star Wars references, though I'm a bigger Star Wars fan. But when you read the third Investigators book, if you're at all familiar with Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, you'll recognize a lot of things that I lovingly ripped off from that film.
That's actually a great segue into the next question, because I wanted to bring up, like, one of the things that I think is really amazing about these books is they offer something for kids and adults. I saw even when we joined the session today that, we've got teachers, we've got parents, we've got kiddos kind of joining us, watching the show. And there's something in the books for all of them, something really funny, humorous, kind of like with a really good cartoon where there's something that you can both sit down and watch together with a parent and an adult, or a teacher and a kid. So I was kind of wondering, like, how do you approach humor, since it's so important to this book and the way that you've kind of written your story, and kind of what do you think it does help you tell a better story?
Yeah, I think for me, it helps me tell a better story because I think on average, I guess, like, this is of course a generalization, this isn't necessarily true all the time, but I think when you're doing something funny, when you're telling a funny story, it is easier to maintain that tone of funny. That doesn't mean that you will end up with something that is funny, but you're trying to reach funny. And for me, if a joke doesn't land, I try to at least have a lot of jokes or jokes that work on multiple levels, where even if the dialogue isn't funny, maybe the visual will be funny, so like it there's something there. And I think with drama, like, for me, I know that if I was trying to write something that's purely serious, I would be unable to not insert jokes to sort of break the tension, which is that's understandable, and plenty of storytellers do that, even with things that are pure drama. You add some lighthearted moments here and there, but I just can't resist having zany stuff. And I think that makes the moments that are sort of sincere and emotional have a little more weight just by the contrast, because everything will be so zany and off the wall that when there is a moment that characters sit down and take something seriously, like, it stands out. Even if it's not necessarily, even if there's still something funny about the whole thing. Yeah, I don't know if I wouldn't be able to keep a straight face if I tried to tell a serious story. Like, I can't do it.
So a lot of your personality and kind of, goes into these books and characters for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, that definitely gets me into trouble in the real world.
Yeah.
But in comics, I can kind of be as crazy and zany as I want, and throw in any jokes. Most of the time, the jokes I'm throwing in just to make myself laugh, And if other people think they're funny, great. And that's why it's good to have an editor, because they will look at it, and if they don't get a joke, then I can decide whether or not I have to reframe it or explain it or cut it. And they will tell me if there's a joke that I can't get away with.
Well, it's good to have that kind of like checks and balances for
Yeah.
jokes, you know.
Yeah, and it's, you know, even though I'm both the writer and the illustrator, for me, comics has always been a very collaborative process. Like I've worked with writers, and I've been just the writer. Like when I was working for Disney, you know, there were artists drawing my work, and you know, this isn't, there's nothing wrong with someone doing comics all on their own, but for me, there's sort of like there's a motivational factor when I know I'm working with someone else, where I have that feedback or you know, just get a response from an audience kind of thing.
That's great. And I wanted to actually talk a little bit about kind of what you mentioned a moment ago about kind of your zany characters that you have sort of populating this book. I think this is probably, these characters in this book are some of the more memorable, imaginative, and really just out there characters, but they all seem to have like vulnerabilities. They all feel very real. Even like the doctor that turns into the helicopter, or the robot that's a ghost. And you know, this very sad robot ghost who I kind of felt compassion for. All he wants is a hug. And I just wanted to hear a little bit about like what inspires you to create these characters? What is it that drives kind of these characters' different motivations, as well as kind of some of the really unique like technology and just some really strange characteristics that go with them, like the cracker dial, right? The cracker and crocodile mix. So love to hear about that a little bit.
Well, some of the characters, a lot of the characters just sort of come out of the blue, like they aren't necessarily planned. You know, possibly my favorite character, it's hard for me to pick a favorite character, but definitely one of my favorites is Dr. Doodle-Doo, the chicken scientist. And he came about totally unintentional when I was doing the first Investigators book. A lot of that book was sort of improvised. I didn't have a very well thought out plot. I mean, I had a plot, but I didn't really have a script. I was just making up as I went along. And at one point, a character calls a scientist an egghead. And that, while I was doing that, that just made me think that there should be, one of the scientists should be a chicken. And thus Dr. Doodle-Doo came about. And so he started as just a joke, as just a response to a scientist being called an egghead. And then here's a doctor who's a chicken. But once that happened, I kept looking for more opportunities to put him into the book. And so he's developed as a character because in each book that I put him in, he's sort of like, you know, there's just more that I discover about him. And so there are a couple of characters like that just weren't necessarily planned. Sea Orb is similar to that. Sea Orb is a robot eyeball, and Sea Orb, it stands for computerized ocular remote butler. And Sea Orb is basically sort of a butler, but also just I guess a gopher character, an all-purpose assistant character. And Sea Orb came about similarly because I just wasn't sure. I wanted something just really off the wall to introduce, and I thought a robotic eyeball would be sort of disturbing, but and funny. But so many kids apparently really like the character, which is cool. But then a character like Crocodile, the interesting thing about Crocodile was that Crocodile started as an idea for basically like a picture book quite some time ago, many moons ago. Crackerdile began as a picture book story about an animal cracker, basically. That was a crocodile that came to life, and like a little girl had this little crocodile animal cracker as her only friend, and she would feed it cheese, and it got bigger. And I don't remember really the rest of the story, just except that she had this big giant crocodile cracker as a pet, basically. But it never developed beyond that. And so when the idea for Investigators came about, I needed a villain, essentially. You know, a Lex Luthor for my Supermans. And it just seemed to make perfect sense that the villain is sort of a reflection of the hero. You know, that's kind of a trope in comics all the time. So I thought, well, a crocodile could be the villain for the alligators. And it just seemed like, you know, a perfect opportunity to recycle the crocodile idea, but you know, give him a tragic backstory of how he turned into a saltine cracker. So yeah, they kind of come from the characters sort of come from everywhere.
Yeah, that's great. I love the idea of a cracker eating cheese to grow. That's just sort of hilarious to me on its face. And yeah, I think that like you do such a good job of making. We were talking about this before kind of everyone joined, but making characters that seem kind of fanciful, kind of completely torn out of the real world, be very vulnerable and feel very relatable, and kind of have their own arcs. You know, they learn things, they change, they grow, they kind of develop as animals, I guess. I was going to say develop as peoples, but that would be a little bit out of the mix. So yeah, I thought that was great, the way that kind of line kind of kept going, not only just in one book, but across multiple books. Although when you said that your favorite character was Dr. Doodle-Doo, I think you might have started a revolt in the chat because there was a lot of Mango love going around.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, but outside of the main characters, like the main characters will always be my favorite. I you know, I feel bad picking Mango over Brash. But Mango is, you know, kind of more fun because they kind of naturally you know, form this dynamic of one will be the serious gator, you know, doing things by the book, you know, all business, and the other one's going to be the zany one. And the zany one is always the more fun one, right? You know, the straight man in the comedy duo usually gets the short end of the stick in terms of appreciation. But I do think Brash has some occasional zany moments here and there. But yeah, like when I think of like my favorite character, I always balance that with the one that's the most fun to write. And Dr. Doodle-Doo he doesn't appear very often. So when I do have the chance to put him in, you know, it's more exciting because I'm not using him all the time. And that also makes him a little more fun to draw because I don't get to draw him a lot because he's not the star. Unless anyone wants a Dr. Doodle-Doo spinoff. Who knows, maybe.
I'm in. I know we're getting close to kind of the audience Q&A round. I've got a couple more questions for you. I want to remind folks that we'll be making sure to get your questions into the mix if you drop them in the chat. So I've seen some folks jumping them in there already, so that's great. And feel free to drop them in. We'll get to as many as we can through the end of the session. And my question about, you know, we talked a lot about the origins of the book and kind of the creation process. I wanted to hear a little bit about like, what were you most excited, or what are you most excited to revisit in the Off the Hook book? Or what are you looking forward to people kind of being, like experiencing as part of that story? One or the other, you can choose your poison there.
So for me, probably the most exciting thing about the third book when I was making it was just that after doing the first two, which I did in a very, very short amount of time. I know for kids, this might feel like an eternity to wait 6 months between books, but that's how long I have to make them, and that's a very short amount of time to make a book. So I did books 1 and 2 very fast, and by book 3 is when I sort of felt like now I have the world has formed. The all the characters have kind of solidified, and so I felt like I knew what I was doing when I was making the third one. And so that was kind of exciting for me because so much of it was like I could just see in my head, like I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I felt like a lot of the humor would land better because I knew where the target was in a way. For the audience, I hope that there are some running gags that I hope they pick up on. But also, I think what I want them to get most out of it is to kind of get a deeper sense of the characters and how they relate to each other, like the emotions that they have for each other. This is kind of something that I have to credit to the editor for the first 3 books. She on book 1, there was a moment in book 1 where Brash is worried about Mango, and I'm trying to remember how it originally played out. But I think it was one of these few moments where I just had Brash making a joke about Mango, being like inexperienced or whatever, something like that. And she said that Brash should show like real concern about Mango's safety. And it wasn't something that I was resistant to. I just it was something that I didn't really think about. Like I was just usually I'm like, oh, the funny path. But if I can make a joke, that's better for the story because everyone loves to laugh. But just her making that one suggestion made me really think about how these characters should care about each other, and then that led to giving Crocodile and Daryl and Brash, Daryl being Crocodile's original name, and he was originally Brash's partner. Like it led to that, grounding their relationship more. And I think the third book is where it really where that really develops. That it leads into much more about like what what things were like when they were partners before Daryl became evil. So hopefully people pick up on that, but if they don't, then I just hope that they think it's funny and they get a laugh out of it. That's really, so long as they laugh, I'm happy.
You win.
Yeah.
Well, having gotten a sneak preview of the newest book, I will say the story is amazing, and you're going to love, everyone out there listening, you're going to love the way the characters continue to develop and all the adventures they go on for this new round of the story. So some things to look forward to for sure. All right, so last thing before we get to the final question is the lightning round. I like to do a little lightning round, kind of get your quick feedback so we can get your answers to some questions real quick. So lightning round questions. Number 1, what's your favorite joke you've written in the Investigators series?
Oh my God, I had an answer for this and I completely forgot it. I think it's in the third book.
Okay.
Oh man, I'm gonna forget. Oh, now I have to think of another favorite joke. It was definitely in the third book. Oh wait, no, wait, what was it? I don't know. Though there are a lot of background jokes that are in the third one that are my. Oh wait, no, I think I know what it is. It's my favorite, or there are so many good ones in the third book, that's the problem, but one of my definite favorites is this part where I feel like I'm spoiling the joke, but there's a part where a building gets fixed mere moments before it gets destroyed again, and then there's a line that a character says that I think I built an entire plot point around that joke. It's not funny when I tell it now, but
You'll just have to read and find out.
yeah.
Yeah, and my favorite is definitely, I love the references back to like X amount of pages ago, and then it.
Oh yes.
So
That is, yeah, that's one of my favorite running gags to put in. Is to reference page numbers as time.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Went on this elevator for 30 pages. Yeah, some good stuff. All right, so lightning round question number 2. What are 2 to 3 things you hope readers get out of this series when they read?
Yeah, like I said, I hope they get a lot of laughs. I hope they laugh. I hope they have fun. I mean, that comes with laughter usually. I hope they enjoy the characters. You know, like not just laugh at the characters, but I hope they kind of find the characters relatable. And I hope they get hooked and keep wanting and keep buying and reading the next books. All
right. Lightning round question number 3, and this wasn't on the list I sent you, so this is new. What's the thing that you cut out, a character or a joke that you are most like that you wish had been included in the books?
That I wish I was included in the books.
Something just left on the editing room floor.
There's one joke in book 4 that was cut that I probably shouldn't say. It was I cut it in advance. And I later heard one of the editors think that was funny, and we should have worked it in. But it was definitely not an appropriate joke. Not is like I say that it makes it sound a lot worse than it is. There's not a lot that I wish didn't get included, because usually what happens is if something is really good and I couldn't fit in, I just put it back in my list of things, and I try to find a way to put it into a future book. That's usually what happens. Yeah, though there are times, and you know, I know I have them written down somewhere. There are times where I have written a joke to be in a specific book for a specific scene, and then when I made the book, I totally forgot it, and then I find that note later on, and I'm like, oh man, now there's nowhere else I can use it, because it was so specific for one scene to have like a character respond to something that's happening, and it totally got lost in the mix.
Maybe investigators number 10 or investigators.
Yeah, I was sure. Yeah.
All back in there. Yeah. Well, great. So my last question for you is kind of a 2-parter, which is, what can we expect from the future of the investigators? And on top of that, where can we keep updated about what's going on with the investigators and you? Social media, website, kind of let us know where we can stay informed.
Well, I'm currently drawing book 5 of Investigators. So, book 3 is out officially tomorrow. Book 4 comes out in September, and book 5 comes out next February. And I have 5 pages left to draw on that one. So I'm almost done with that. Will there be a 6th book? who knows? It seems likely, but nothing's set in stone just yet. So we'll see. As for what happens, things definitely get kind of bigger and a little more epic. In like book 4 and 5, the stakes are very high. So I hope everyone sticks it out for the long run, because I think books 4 and 5 will be a lot of fun. And book 3 is probably my favorite still. Book 3 is my favorite, I think. As for where to find me, my Instagram is John Green Art, and my Twitter is John Green Art. So just John Green Art, and you'll find me. And the best place for investigators is probably the official website, which is investigatorsbooks.com. And there's like puzzles and games and character info, animations, music, and where to buy the books and all that sort of stuff.
All right. Well, excellent. Well, it's been really nice chatting with you. I will now get out of the way and let our very excited fans talk a little with you and hear a little from you about their questions on the investigators. And just want to say I appreciate the books for having me, and of course having this conversation. And thanks for everybody for listening in. And I will say sayonara. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Adam, for being a really good host. Thank you. All right. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to invite everybody to turn their cameras on now if they want to, so that we can see everybody's excited faces. And I've been kind of keeping track of the questions that have been coming through. So one of the first ones we got was from Adrian, and Adrian wanted to know which character was your favorite. Now, I know you kind of danced around Mango or Brash, and you did mention Dr. Doodle Doo as being a good favorite, but I'm gonna put your feet to the fire. Who's your favorite, Mango or Brash?
Well, of the Gators, so Mango is definitely, I'd say, my favorite, though Brash is slightly easier to draw.
Okay.
The Brad, like, so I like writing Mango, and I like giving him zany things to do, but getting the curve on his snout is harder to get right than Brash, who just has a right angle for a jaw. So Brash is a little bit easier to draw whenever I have to come across them. So Mango is frustrating just because I end up doing a lot more erasing and redrawing on
them. Okay, that's a good answer. We'll go with that. And then we did have a couple of people, Edie and Brooks, ask this, which book in the series was your favorite? Now, you did say that book 3 was your favorite. So why is it book 3?
Partly because after books 1 and 2, for me, it really felt like book 3 gave me the most opportunity to, like, I felt the most familiar with the characters. So I felt like while I was making it, the story just came the most naturally, and the jokes seemed to fit the best and just be the funniest overall. And it's a lot, I think it's more action packed. There's a lot more action going on than the previous 2 books, and there's also a lot more emotional moments going on. And there are some new characters. There's a chameleon character named Cilantro who appears, and she's a lot of fun. So yeah, really, it was kind of the one that I was most excited. I felt familiar with, so I was very excited to draw it. Yeah. Okay. I guess that sums it up.
Okay, that's a good answer. Ryan, who I think this was the same Ryan, said that these were so funny he almost snorted water through his nose while he was reading these. Ryan, I can relate. Okay. But Ryan also thinks that the investigators need to take a trip to the moon.
It's funny you should say that.
They do.
I'm not saying that they take a trip to the moon. But in book 4, but in book 4, it comes close, more or less. I mean, someone takes a trip to the moon in book 4, and there are some astronauts and things in book 4. So stick around.
So Brian might have gotten he has a little ESP maybe going.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Tammy wanted to know if you have kids that are early readers for your books before you send them off to your editor.
No. I don't have any kids of my own. I mean, I have nephews, but they are at this point, for the most part, above the age group of investigators. But no, I don't really have anyone that I have read the books to give the kid seal of approval. Though I do have plenty of friends who have kids that are the right age, and they will read they read it after the fact and they give it the thumbs up. So at least I know I'm on the right track. But I'm pretty much a kid in my head anyway. So
we're all kids at heart. That's
yes.
why we're here.
Yes.
Yeah. Noah wanted to know if there is a silly song in this newest book.
Yes.
Well, there's always a montage in any book.
Yes, for the most part. I will say that 4 out of 5 books do have multiple musical montages. So you can guess there's only 2 after this one comes out. The third one definitely has some, and then there's 2 left. And so one of them you'll have to guess does not have a musical montage, but there's something else instead. So, I have to mix it up. I have to throw some surprises at you every now and then.
That's right. You talked about a Dr. Doodle-Doo spinoff. Okay, everybody raise your hands if you want a Dr. Doodle-Doo spinoff. Raise your hands. Okay, good. All right. We have your answer. There you go. And you can tell your editor we said so.
It's good to know.
Yeah. John wants to know who your favorite author is.
Who my favorite author is? It's not necessarily a thing I think about too much, but I will say that as far as what writer and artist probably influenced me the most, I would say is Jim Davis, who is the creator of Garfield. If everyone knows Garfield the cat. So because that was how I got into comics, basically, is when I was a little kid. I read Garfield in the newspapers, and I kind of learned how to draw by copying Garfield when I was in school, and I was homesick a lot as a kid. And so there wasn't anything to do when I was little. There were no Nintendo Switches. So I just drew comic strip characters, and Garfield at that time I thought was the best illustrated one. So that was the one that I copied, and I learned how to draw by copying Garfield. And that just kind of led into me reading more of the Garfield collections and watching the Garfield cartoons. And, so that's probably the writer and artist who had the most influence on who I became as a creator.
Okay. And Nate had asked if you have any other comic book authors that you really like. Any other comic books that you read?
Yeah, no, I don't, since I'm spending so much time making my own comics, I don't have as much time as I used to sort of discover comics. Though I can definitely recommend my friend's book. Dave Roman, he does a book series called Astronaut Academy, and he has a 3rd book coming out this April. And those books are really fun. They're about kids that go to school in outer space. And Dave, I love his comics. When I met him, we've known each other for more than 20 years at this point. But when I met him, he and we had the same origin story, I like to say, in that we grew up nowhere near each other, but when we were both little kids in school, we were both sick all the time. And, to occupy ourselves, we would make our own comics and photocopy them and sell them to kids at our schools. And so when we met in college, we discovered we had this same origin story. And we, traded the comics that we were making with each other, and we started making comics together. And so as a peer in comics creation, he's one of my favorites because we've had a very collaborative relationship, and his books are great. They always make me laugh. So
nice. Well, Adam also thinks there should be a Dr. Copter spinoff too. So yeah, raise your hands if you want a Dr. Copter spinoff too. Exactly. All right. Well, unless anybody has any other questions, Don, thank you so much for being here this evening with us. And Adam, thank you too for leading a great discussion. This was just a fun night. And I can't think of a better way to spend any evening than talking with one of our favorites about books that just make us laugh and that we love to share with everybody in our lives. So thank you so much for the investigators, and thanks for spending this evening with us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me. I hope everyone enjoys the book. I had a blast making it. And I hope I get to keep making them for a long time until my arms give out.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, Declan, I'm sorry. I wrote your question down and I forgot. Declan had one last question. Declan wants to know if you like Bongo or Marcia better.
I like Bongo or Marcia better. That's a tough question because half the time Bongo and Marcia can't even get their names straight. They can't even tell each other apart. I don't know. They started as just a joke, and they've kind of become recurring characters, but they are a little interchangeable. I think I might like Marcia better. I think Marcia is similarly, with Mango and Brash, there's like the serious one and the silly one. Bongo and Marcia, they're a lot more serious characters, but Marcia I think is more intense. I think Marcia screams a lot more. And it's always fun to draw characters screaming.
Okay, we'll go with that. All right. Well, again, John, thank you for being here. Adam, thank you so much for leading a great discussion. And all of you guys, thank you for coming out. Thank you for reading The Investigators and being excited about The Investigators. And make sure you share them with your friends too. So thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Bye.